Argentinian economy is collapsing. The United States had to bail out Argentina before it turns into a disaster. The United States government just spent $20 billion saving Argentina, but it's not going to help because the situation is going to get a lot worse. Argentina, not that long ago, was one of the richest countries in the world. But the moment the government intervened in the economy, it turned into a disaster. And this is where Argentina is right now, when the US government had to step in and bail out the government. Unfortunately, the United States is on the exact same trajectory, where the US government is intervening in the economy more and more. Every single time that the government tries to take the money from the rich people and distribute it and give it to the poor people, it ends up destroying the entire economy, where it's not just going to destroy the lives of the rich people, but it's going to make the lives of the poor people even poorer. So let's try to figure out what exactly is happening to Argentina and why Donald Trump decided to give Argentina $20 billion. The Argentinian economy has been on a roller coaster. Sometimes it's growing tremendously, and then there are times when it's collapsing dramatically. However, the real tragedy was recently, where the Argentinian economy since early 2000s was growing tremendously, but then it collapsed in 2018 and 2019. However, it recovered since then, but it seems like it is on a trajectory to completely collapse. The situation gets even worse when you look at the inflation data. The average inflation before the current crisis was about 50%. In the US, everybody is complaining about an inflation rate of 2.9%. This is what a real catastrophe looks like. When the United States was going through an inflation of almost 9% in 2022, Argentina was having an inflation rate of 300%. This is by far one of the highest inflation all across the globe. Just by looking at these numbers, you can say that Argentina is in a very serious crisis. However, they have solved a lot of their problems and inflation has cooled down to 36%. That is 12 to 13 times the inflation rate of the United States. That is still extremely high. This is the kind of inflation that does not allow anybody to do business. Can you actually live in a country where inflation is 36% or 300% in some cases? The Central Bank of Argentina reacted by increasing the interest rates to 126%. Everybody is complaining that interest rates in the United States are 4% and that's too high. We need at least 3% to do business. In Argentina, interest rates are 126%. But because they have fixed inflation and brought it down to 36%, now the new interest rate is about 29%. And this number is not going to come down anytime soon. And Argentinian government, like any other government, borrows a lot of money. Imagine at what interest rate the Argentinian government had to refinance its debts when the interest rate in Argentina were about 126%. This is when you know that the Argentinian government was in a huge trouble and they have hundreds of billions of dollars of debts. At this point, the Argentinian economy is entirely broken. It simply doesn't work. They simply destroyed the entire economy. And Argentina, over the last 50 to 70 years, was one of the economies where the government intervened and provided a lot of benefits to its citizens. Back in the days, everybody was happy. The government is taking care of the average citizen. But look at what's happening to Argentina today. Now, to understand what exactly is happening to the economy and how exactly to fix it and why Donald Trump decided to give $20 billion to Argentina, we have to understand how currencies work. Argentina has the Argentinian peso. A currency is an artificially created commodity by the government to make it easier for business to trade, to make it easier for people to do business and buy stuff, because a currency is a medium of an exchange. The currency by itself does not have any intrinsic value like gold has, so its value is created through demand and supply. The central bank of the country has full control over the supply of this commodity. So the more it supplies the market with pesos, the less its value is going to be. The more there is demand for the peso and less the supply for this currency, then the more valuable the currency is going to become. One of the things that determines the value of the currency is how much the country is buying and how much the country is selling. Argentina buys a lot of things from outside, especially when it comes to cars and electronics. So when Argentina buys cars from Germany or from the United States, they cannot pay the US company with pesos. They have to pay them in the US dollars. So the Argentinian people are going to buy US dollars, so the demand for the dollars is rising and the supply of the pesos in the market is rising and the demand for the pesos is falling, and that weakens the currency. On the other side, when Argentina is exporting products to the rest of the world, let's say corn, then that company or that country, let's say the United States that is buying corn from Argentina, the US company will have to pay pesos in the open markets, and that increases the demand for the pesos, which strengthens the pesos. And Argentina is one of the richest countries in the world when it comes to land. It has some of the best land in the world, where it grows wheat, corn, soybeans, and a lot more. But when it comes to manufacturing stuff, Argentina is a very poor nation. And up until recently, Argentina was actually running a trade deficit, where Argentina was buying a lot more than it's selling to the rest of the world. So the demand for the Argentinian pesos over the years has been going down and down and down. And where do you think the government has taken all of those money that it cannot possibly afford? It kept printing that money, which increased the supply of pesos in the market. Even though that Argentina is now producing far more than it's actually importing, it has another fundamental serious problem. Argentina is filled with debt. It has $305 billion worth of foreign debt. And when Argentina has to pay interest on that debt, it has to pay in US dollars. So even though that Argentina is making a lot of money by exporting things to the rest of the world, it has to pay the debt. So it has to take all of these pesos and buy foreign currency such as the US dollar, so it is increasing the supply of pesos in the market and decreasing the demand for the pesos in the market. So even though they fixed a trade balance, it still poses a threat. In fact, the current inflation is a government-created inflation, because over the last 15 years, the government of Argentina has been running persistent deficit. Because the government of Argentina promised so many benefits to the average citizens, but the government is not making that much money from taxes. Where else do you think the government is going to take that money from? So if the government has promised, but it's not earning that much money from taxes, then the government either going to borrow that money from somewhere or it's going to print that money. Whenever you're printing money or even borrowing money, you're increasing the supply of pesos, which is devaluing the currency, which is why investors lost faith in the peso. So imagine you're a business person in Argentina and you're making a lot of money. Now you have 100 million pesos. Are you going to sit on 100 million pesos knowing that the Argentinian government every single year is printing so much money and devaluing the currency? Well, of course not. You're going to go and convert your pesos into dollars, euros, or any other currency that does not devalue this fast. Which is why the Argentinian government has put capital controls. So you cannot possibly exchange your 100 million pesos into the dollars, because the government is trying to create artificial demand for the pesos and prevent the people from buying the US dollars. But it doesn't work, because as long as you know that you're losing money, you're going to find a way to do that. Which is why there is a huge black market in Argentina where people simply exchange their pesos back to the dollars, which is why the peso has been losing most of its value despite the fact that the government has been trying to control the currency. The current president of Argentina tried to peg the peso to the dollar. So because we cannot fix the problem, because we have lost control of our currency, let's simply peg the peso to the dollar. However the dollar moves, the peso is going to move. And because we know that the peso is overvalued, since we have created so much money, and we have printed so much money over the last 20 to 30 years, let's devalue the peso by 2% monthly. So we're going to devalue it, but not instantly. Because if we're going to instantly devalue the peso, there is going to be an economic shock. Suddenly, everything that we import from the rest of the world is going to cost a lot more. The current president of Argentina will say, it's not my fault that my predecessors have been printing so much money. It's not my fault. Why do I have to take the responsibility? But if you want to fix the problem, you will have to take the responsibility. You will have to take that very harsh decisions. Because just because you're president, it does not cancel everything that the government has done previously before you came to power. So if you're devaluing the currency by 2% monthly, while the inflation is 10 to 20%, your currency is still significantly overvalued and nobody wants to hold it. And that's why the president of Argentina decided that it is time to let the market decide the value of the peso. So in April of this year, they have lifted all capital controls to let the market decide the value of the peso. Prior to that, you can see that devaluation is happening very, very slowly. And then suddenly after April, devaluation literally skyrocketed. Where a single dollar was equal to around 1,000 pesos, now it's almost 1,400 pesos, if not more than that. That is the crisis that Argentina is facing. And if this is going to continue, then Argentinian peso is going to entirely lose all of its value. And if that happens, then the economy turns into a complete catastrophe. What makes this situation even worse, that the Argentinian central bank does not have enough reserves to protect the peso. If you have a free market economy, then the central bank can protect the currency by using its reserve to buy and sell the currency. For example, if there is not enough demand for the peso, the Argentinian central bank will use tens of billions of dollars that it has in reserves and will start buying the currency in the open market. That will create artificial demand and will strengthen the currency, and vice versa. The problem is that the Argentinian central bank is almost broke. It doesn't have much money. It doesn't have much reserves because it depleted its reserves over the last 20 years. So if you have a free market and you don't have reserves to protect your currency, suddenly you are in a financial catastrophe. Everybody who has the pesos now no longer has capital controls and are exchanging their pesos back to the dollars. The real question is, how exactly Donald Trump or the United States are trying to save Argentina? The real problem that they're facing is that nobody trusts the pesos and there isn't enough demand for the pesos. So the US government is creating an artificial demand for the pesos by buying $20 billion worth of pesos in the market. Usually that happens when one country buys a lot of things from another country. But in this case, it is even more favorable to the Argentinian government because it's going to be a currency swap. They're not just buying $20 billion worth of government pesos or Argentinian pesos, but rather they're simply giving the Argentinian central bank $20 billion. In exchange, the United States is receiving $20 billion worth of Argentinian pesos. So now we have created $20 billion worth of demand of Argentinian pesos. And secondly, the Argentinian central bank is now left with $20 billion extra reserves that it can use from now onwards to continue creating the artificial demand for the Argentinian peso to prevent it from collapsing. That is literally a lifeline to save the entire economy. If it wasn't for this help, the Argentinian economy could have turned into a complete disaster. The real question is it going to save the economy? Well, absolutely not. But it's certainly going to give it time to manage its economy and fix the problem. The only way to get out of this crisis is to let the market trust the peso, and secondly, to let the market determine the value of the peso. Because the government has been mismanaging their currency over the last 20 years, nobody trusts the peso. But now, because the government of the United States is buying $20 billion worth of government pesos, the trust of investors is back to the peso. If the US government is behind the peso, if the US government is ready to bail out the peso, if the US government is ready to back up the peso, then investors are a bit more confident to buy the peso or keep the peso. and not rush to the exchange market to turn their pesos into dollars the moment a bit of pesos lie into their hands. That is probably the best help the government has provided to the Argentinian currency. Argentina needs a few more years of a free market economy before investors truly trust the peso and will start holding the peso and not selling them instantly. And all of this happened because the government decided that we have to provide benefits to our citizens, but you have to ask yourself every single time, whenever the government is printing money or borrowing money, it is creating inflation and it's hurting everyone else. And that's exactly what the US government has been doing lately. It is borrowing trillions of dollars in order to keep the social programs and pay off its debts and fund the most powerful military in the world. In the short run, it is going to help. In the long run, it will lead to the exact same problem that Argentina is facing right now. And that is why you cannot trust any government, whether it's the Argentinian government, the US government. If you want truly financial freedom, if you want to truly build wealth, then you should not be holding currencies, but rather you should be holding real assets. You could be holding gold, you could be holding real estate, but the fastest and the best way to build wealth is through the stock market. Because unlike gold that does not produce anything, or real estate that provides rental service, but it's not literally making a lot of money, companies in the stock market are changing the world. They're building the AI, they're building the iPhones, they're literally building everything that you're actually using on your day-to-day basis. And if you know which of these stocks to buy, suddenly you're going to build real wealth. And if you want to know what are the top 5 stocks that you should be buying right now, then check out the first link in the description of this video. That's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.